Camarilla titles in Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. This video is an overview of titles and some of what they do. It is not an in-depth delve into each title and every detail of what each titled vampire is supposed to do. Each domain is different, and although the title could exist in all domains, their tasks could be essentially different. Also, depending on the size of the domain, some titles could take on roles from other titles to consolidate duties with a fewer number of kindred within the domain. I am going to start the titles off with the Inner Circle. The Inner Circle is the head of the Camarilla. Its members sit and debate and lead the sect from secret locations only known by them and those they choose to let know. The only ones that know for sure who are members of the Inner Circle are the Justicars. It is assumed that the Inner Circle is just a council of 7 of the most powerful princes in the Camarilla. The only definite meetings of the Inner Circle are when they meet every 13 years to choose new Justicars. Justicars. There are only 5 Justicars at one given time, and they each must represent their clan, decide matters of war and law, and act as the voice of the Inner Circle. Above all, they enforce the traditions. Justicars act as monarchs of their clans, appointed by the Inner Circle to 13-year terms. Few, save the Vintru, serve more than one term. Justicars may command any of the assets and resources of the Camarilla at will, including every member of it. Whether such exactions seem more like a valuable honor from royalty or a loathsome theft by tyranny depends on Justicar's etiquette, and on whether it was your child and haven they confiscated. Archons. Archons are not simple hired killers. Archons are elite hired killers, and warriors and scholars and investigators. Each Justicar hand-selects their own Archons, even competing for exceptional servants. The candidate Archon gets one chance to decline. If they accept, they serve the Justicars, enforcing Camarilla law, seeking out secrets, or spying out the foes of the Ivory Tower. Some Archons operate alone, others in coteries. Often the Justicar binds these Archons to themselves or to each other with a blood bond. Even unbound, the Archons have less freedom of action than their masters, but they can order a kindred put to final death and expect to be obeyed. Indeed, an Archon can decimate an entire domain without explanation. Learning to avoid such punishment, or at least to avoid such Archons, remains an exercise in loyalty and survival. The Prince, also called a sovereign, prefect, premier, or governor. The title of prince is generally given to the eldest or most powerful within the city. This power can mean strength, but generally it means political strength. A physically strong prince would have to do things themselves, whereas a politically strong prince can cripple another kindred with a phone call or a direct order to a subordinate. The prince represents their city, for good and evil. They are in charge of law, governance, and enforcing the traditions. As those traditions describe the rights and responsibilities of the elder, such as those of the prince to give or withhold the gift of embracing another to their subjects, or sentence a kindred within their domain to final death. Duties of the prince, enforcing the traditions. If the masquerade flickers in a Camarilla city, the Justicars do not look to those who broke the traditions, but to the prince who was supposed to enforce them. Because of this, princes have the final say on Elysiums within a city, grant authority to sire new vampires, and call blood hunts. Trials. The prince will either judge all trials or appoint another to the task. Nothing happens in a prince's territory without the prince's knowledge. If something does slip by the prince, they are quick to respond and generally not favorably. Granting boons. Hearing petitions from other kindred and allotting domains and hunting grounds within the city. Holding court. Meeting with and formally accepting visitors in the area as per the traditions of domain and hospitality. Princes will not allow kindred within their domain if they believe they will be a problem. The seneschal, or sometimes referred to as the chamberlain, advisor, or lieutenant. A seneschal is the right hand of the prince, empowered to act in their stead. It is not an uncomplicated position to occupy, perhaps because everyone sees a voluntary seneschal as a potential Iago. Nevertheless, seneschal is a traditional court role, and one that is very influential. It is a position in which tacticians, administrators, and advisors thrive, and one worth pursuing if you have a talent for noticing things otherwise overlooked. These are the vampires dealt with when one wishes to see the prince, unless, of course, the matter is of grave importance. Often, the seneschal will take the role of domain steward when a prince falls to torpor or in other ways becomes unable to perform their duties. However, the crows feast happily on all dead flesh, and few princes will choose a seneschal who look too hungrily in their direction. For this reason, most seneschals have tasted their ruler's blood at least once. The sheriff, or sometimes called the praetorian, scourge, inspector, or executioner. The sheriff ensures that the traditions and the decrees of the prince are obeyed, hunts down violators, and delivers just punishment. In the case of minor violations or known enemies of the Camarilla, the sheriff is usually authorized to act as both judge and jailer executioner, but when it comes to greater offenses, they will deliver the accused to the court to be judged. Sheriffs must be superlative hunters and investigators. There are many ways of doing the job, but the best sheriffs are calculating, sharp, and merciless. After the resurgence of the anarch revolt and with the added importance of maintaining the masquerade, our sheriffs must be always watching for signs of insurgency, unafraid to strike when they find them. Duties of the sheriff include protecting the city against itself, locating and punishing lawbreakers. The Primogen Council, or also referred to as the Senate, the Presidium, or the Council of Elders. The Primogen Council represents the interests of the clans and advises the prince on matters of law and rule. Traditionally, it consists of representatives from each of the most prominent clans in the domain, naturally favoring those of the Camarilla, though outsiders are allowed to report any issues to a Primogen not of their own clan. Primogen are often elders, but there are no rules in place that this is how it must be. In fact, during the last few decades, more and more councils have seen drastic changes to their structure. The power of the Primogen varies from city to city, as in one city, the Primogen are nothing more than a rubber stamp for the prince, and in other cities the prince does nothing without approval of their Primogen council. Clan Whip. Sometimes a Primogen will choose to appoint a second in command. The clan whip is tasked with collecting the opinions of the various members of the clan or faction and serves as enforcer and advisor to the Primogen. If a Primogen needs support in an upcoming vote, they will send their whip to aid him in gaining support from the other clans by calling in favors or making new ones to get what their Primogen needs. The herald, or sometimes referred to as the whisperer, harpy, the news, ambassador, or voice of the prince. A herald acts as the voice of the prince, proclaiming decrees to kindred subjects and carrying messages to and from other rulers. In this time, where we must fear the use of technology, many heralds are still well connected outside of their domains, endlessly finding new ways to communicate and giving us a way to reach our kin despite the dangers. At Elysia, there will often be a herald telling tales of kindred activity, celebrating our victories and sharing news of enemies and allies in faraway territories. In some domains, there is no herald as such, but inevitably certain individuals, who happen to be sufficiently inspiring or charismatic, will gain the confidence and attention of the many, and the control over status and truth that follows with that. By those who appreciate them, they may be given the title of the news. Others will, echoing Virgil, whisper about the insatiable harpies. An important task in any domain is maintaining the records of prestation, the system of favors traded, offered, won, and used. The herald responsible for this is known as the chancellor. Prestation. The system of prestation replaces feelings of isolation and hunger with something to strive for, with favors and rewards that can be won. The beauty of the system is in its simplicity. Whenever a kindred publicly asks another for assistance, the chancellor diligently records it. In this way, favors become loans to be paid off, investments in the future. Paying back is a matter of honor, and those who refuse find themselves hunted and despised. Duties of the herald include announcing the decrees of the prince, keeping the records of prestation. The hound or deputy. The sheriff is sometimes granted the ability to appoint hounds, who serves as his investigators and enforcers. Hounds may be keen-eyed, quick-witted fact-finders, but just as frequently, they're sadistic bullies who take pleasure in their sanctioned brand of corrupt justice. During an investigation or interrogation, a hound may breach the traditions if it becomes necessary to bring a rogue kindred to heel. Princes generally grant hounds a good deal of leeway in this regard, but repeated or egregious breaches or violations that compound the crimes of a transgressor may well earn the hound a censure or worse. See the entry for the sheriff above for more information on treating the traditions too malleably. Keeper of Elysium. This is a largely honorific title, though it has many practical responsibilities. The Keeper of Elysium assures that the customs of Elysium are observed and is a caretaker of sites declared Elysium by a prince. The duties and privileges of the Keeper of Elysium begin and end in those hallowed halls. Once outside an area with Elysium status, the Keeper is just another kindred. In fact, some large domains or in domains where the prince decentralizes the power of another kindred of the court, each Elysium has its own separate keeper. The ultimate result is the same. The Keeper of Elysium is both host and security in that august place, and she alone can remove transgressors against civility and personal safety. Those who fall into this role for a few are those who actively seek to be custodians of hidden domains where vampires may revel in the damned natures. Have no common characteristics. Indeed, some princes even use the title punitively to teach recalcitrant or presumptuous vampires object lessons about the nature of the kindred social contract. Principle of Faith. In times of strife, kindred and kine alike turn to faith for comfort and guidance. The principle of faith is an ancient position that has recently come back in vogue in certain domains. The title covers a bewildering array of courtly advisors on matters of the soul, from the Christian preacher reminding the kindred of the domain of their humanity, or learned Hakimite advising the prince on matters of cultural diplomacy, to the Methuselah cultist trying to teach respect for the ancestors. Some are intolerant fanatics who seek to root out heresy. Others represent a broad congregation of believers, seeking deeper meaning from within the traditionally secular government of the night. The principle has a varying degree of power, from efficient of courtly rituals that no one really puts much stock in, to being able to override the prince on matters of faith and forgiveness. Some principles are even consulted in matters of interpretation of the traditions. Usually the principal is appointed by the prince, but they may also be a popular preacher lifted to official power by their congregation. The faith of a powerful principal often becomes the official religion of a domain. The Shadow. The Shadow is formal advisor to a coterie, assigned by the prince to shepherd them through the minefield of kindred society. The Shadow does not lead the coterie, and has no special ability to punish or discipline its members. They are typically a much older kindred with unique wisdom or talents, worthy of guiding the young, or alternatively someone who has angered the prince but cannot be openly punished, instead receiving a thankless task. A wise shadow nurtures their coterie into a loyal and useful team of allies. But whether prince or shadow scores the first hit is unimportant, as long as the Camarilla wins. The Scourge. The Scourge is responsible for hunting and the destruction of vampires of 14th generation and higher, as well as those that are illegally embraced. Unlike the sheriff position, the Scourge doesn't have a pretense of investigation, as they are searching out vampires who are guilty by their very nature. The Alaster. This title is given by the Inner Circle as their secret police to hunt those most dangerous criminals to Camarilla. They are on the same level as Archons, but only when on the hunt of one of the Red List, a list of the most wanted. I hope that you enjoyed this video and were able to learn something new, or at least pick up on something that you could use in your own game.